Everybody, welcome to Beyond the Arc. Happy Thursday. Ashley Nicole Moss here, and I have a very special guest. I think it's your first time on the pod. Brad Botkin's
It
in the
is.
building. First time, right?
It is. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Welcome to the show. We have so much to discuss. I mean, no surprise, last night, Cavs at Celtics. The Celtics went ahead and ended the series finally. No Donovan Mitchell, no Jared Allen. I mean, the list goes on and on, but I think it's more of an interesting conversation to look at the Celtics and how they are going to deal with not really being challenged probably until they get to the final. So we'll start there and then we'll go ahead and talk about the Cavs and everything chaotic that's going on over there. But first and foremost, I mean, Tatum had a great night last night. The Celtics did what they were supposed to do, but any concerns on your part that they haven't really been challenged? Jimmy Butler less, Miami Heat, Donovan Mitchell less in some games, Cleveland Cavaliers. They've been coasting their way to the conference finals.
Yeah, but the core of this team has been together for so long and been through so many wars. This isn't a situation where, like, this particular year, they need to have their metal tested in order to be ready to go come conference finals and potentially finals. So, no, I mean, I think having an easy go of it, relatively speaking, is good for this team. I
Mm-hmm.
think the simple truth is most teams right now are banged up. Even the Celtics are banged up.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully, they get Porzingis back. But I wouldn't say they haven't been tested. I think to some degree the 4-1 series finish with Cleveland makes it seem like that was a pretty easy series. But they were tested at different points. The Miami series was a cakewalk, but they were tested at different points, including last night when I didn't think that was the Celtics playing down to an injured Cleveland team. I thought the Celtics played pretty well. Al Horford was incredible. We talk about these ageless guys, LeBron James and Stephen Curry. Al Horford is about to turn 38. He's in his 17th season.
Mm-hmm.
He was phenomenal last night. So I think there's a lot of good signs moving forward for the Celtics, and something that I wouldn't be worried about at all is whether or not they've been tested. I would also say, Ashley, that your Knicks, who I think are going to play the Celtics,
Mm-hmm.
I think they will test them. So
Okay.
if
So
we're,
you think the test is going to come probably Eastern Conference Finals
well,
before
I
we.
do. I think,
Okay.
especially if Anunoby gets back, I'm sure we'll touch on that. But that I don't think in any way, with the way Jalen Brunson's playing and the way that DiVincenzo and Hart and
Mm-hmm.
the Knicks could play like the 97 Bulls right now, and I think it'd be a 5-point game with 5 minutes to play. So I do think they'll be tested next round.
Well, we'll definitely get into the Knicks and that series a little bit later, but I think it's interesting, right? Because we already knew the Celtics were a really good team. They've been good the entire regular season,
Yeah.
fluctuating between number one and number two pretty much the entire year. And outside of the one game they gave up to Miami and the one game they gave up to Cleveland, which is very much on brand for the Celtics. And you can say that it's playing with their food, and or you can just say, look, sometimes you get winners fatigue. You're constantly winning. You forget sometimes that you got to go ahead and put forth the effort to actually win when you're that good of a team. And I think
Mhm.
that really is kind of what we see from the Boston Celtics. They're so good for predominantly most of the regular season. They get into the playoffs. They're already in win mode. They've been winning all year. Sometimes maybe you get a little bit bored with your opponent. You get a little bit bored with the series. But I mean, outside of them being a good team, did you learn anything about this Celtics team that you didn't already know by watching them in the regular season?
No, I think we know, to your point, that they're not a good team. They're, on paper, they're one of the greatest teams ever that we saw in the regular season. They are 5 deep in a way that I think you have to go back to the Kevin Durant Warriors to find a starting lineup. You could make an argument for Denver as well, which is what I'm predicting will end up being the finals, if that's going to be a knockdown, drag-out starting lineup clash. I think the Celtics are right now. I think that the storyline that the Celtics will beat themselves, that they
Mm-hmm.
will settle for contested jump shots, that they won't force the issue into the paint, that they sort of fall apart in a close game. They had half their games this year which is a crazy stat. Half their games, they had a 20-point lead.
Mm-hmm.
And so they weren't, on paper, terrific in the last 3 minutes of like the handful of close games that they played. They're like middle of the pack performance-wise. So on a team that there's almost nothing to point to in terms of flaws, that continues to be the one thing that people like us that need something to talk about, we say, hey, how will they be in a close game? How will they be when they're finally tested in a series? I don't have concerns with them, and here's why. They're a different team than they were when those things were happening. Adding Kristaps Porzingis spaces things out so much. Now, I preface that by saying they need him back.
Okay.
But when he's there, they are so spaced out. The driving lanes, their appetite is so wet for those that they can't not take advantage of them as consistently as in the past. They sometimes settle for jumpers. So last night, I was kind of watching for that. I liked the way Jason Tatum got into the paint for the most part. I liked the way they forced the issue downhill. They moved the ball. So I'm not quite as concerned with what I think that one low-hanging storyline has been for the Celtics, because I think they're a different team with Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis.
Before I get to the Cavs, which I feel like is the more meatier part of this conversation, when you mentioned Porzingis, that's one thing that I said is that they need him back, but I'm not sure that whether it's the Knicks or the Pacers, obviously I'm hoping it's my New York Knicks, but banged up, beat up as the Knicks are, I don't know if necessarily Porzingis is a necessity to even beat the Knicks with how gritty and how ferocious that they play. I think you really only would be weary about his absence going into the finals against the Mavericks or the Nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the Eastern Conference Finals, I feel like you would feel it. I definitely feel like it would even the playing fields a little bit more so with the Knicks than I do think it would with the Pacers. But I don't know if his absence would be as detrimental as I feel like it would be in the finals.
No, because neither the Knicks or the Pacers, even at full strength, are as good as the Nuggets. So, yeah, in that regard, if you're sitting on the fence and say, where would I rather have him healthy for? Certainly they need him more in the finals if they make it that far. I'm just speaking to the fact that I think that, which I do think was a legitimate thing, sort of an Achilles heel of the team, I think Porzingis has largely taken that away.
Right.
And to some degree, Drew Holiday has as well. They are so spread out and such a multifaceted offense that even when Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum gets a little bit hesitant, gets a little bit settling for shots, gets a little bit stagnant, with Derek White, with Drew Holiday, when Porzingis is in there running two-man action, they have so much fluidity to their offense now. I don't think it's as heliocentric where you put the ball in Tatum's hands, and if he just sort of decides to go stale for a couple possessions, then the team stays that way. I think they are so versatile now and so loaded top to bottom in their five-man units that it doesn't require Tatum to always have his foot on the gas, which maybe isn't his demeanor to always be that way. So I just think the Celtics are awesome. But yeah, I think we will talk about who I think they're going to play in the Knicks. And do I think the Knicks or the Nuggets? No, but I think that's going to be a serious series.
Yeah, like I said, we'll get to that a little bit later in the show, but the meatier part of this series ending the Cavs and the Celtics is obviously the future of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And, after this series and throughout the course of the season, honestly, it's become apparent or, questions have continued to arise of whether or not Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland can play together. And now there's various reports and rumors that are circulating saying that the front office and everybody within the Cavs organization does not see this as a fit that can withstand, another season, and it has to be one or the other. Now, Donovan Mitchell is eligible for an extension this offseason, but if he doesn't sign it, that would indicate that the Cavs would need to explore trading him or risk losing him for nothing after the 2024-2025 season when he becomes a free agent. Now, there were always rumors about Donovan Mitchell going back home to the tri-state. He's from, I believe, Westchester County. So the Knicks or the Nets are always in the conversation. The Lakers have kind of finagled their way into the conversation, the Miami Heat, although that's probably out of all of the names that we mentioned or teams that we mentioned, probably the least likely because they don't have much to offer. Tyler Hero's draft stock has absolutely plummeted in the last
years. But Ashley, he's going to be the new Damian Lillard. Whether they have what it takes or not, everyone's always going to say, "Oh, Miami Heat," because we've heard them mentioned in the past, and we'll start talking about it. I promise.
We do remember that he was very close, and he's given multiple interviews since getting traded to Cleveland that he thought he was going to be a New York Knick. And obviously Utah being greedy with the picks, that ultimately kind of nixed that trade. So there's a possibility, if it's not the Knicks, it could be the Nets, who have a lot to offer with current players and draft picks. Miami, yes, everyone wants to play in Miami, but we're talking about a team that is already kind of bones and don't have much if he ends up being traded. But there's also something that's interesting about this, that if Donovan Mitchell does stay, it seems that Rich Paul and Clutch, who represent Darius Garland, will try to go ahead and get their client moved. So with all the moving parts of this, if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers and you have to make a decision, which it seems like you have to, is your decision with Donovan Mitchell, who may or may not be interested in staying the long term with Cleveland, or do you go Darius Garland, who's kind of been there from the beginning of what you've been trying to build?
Well, Ashley, you're more plugged in than me, so I mean, this is closed door stuff. I mean, you've got to have real reason to believe that Donovan Mitchell is going to stay, and so you've got to talk to the right people. You've got to feel which way the wind is blowing, and forget what we all talk about on podcasts and what's going to be reported. It's like you've got to get in a room and you've got to have a realistic idea of whether he's going to stay. If he is, then obviously you go with Donovan Mitchell. This guy's one of like the 4 or 5 best playoff performers in the league. I mean, this guy's sort of like a Jimmy Butler for Cleveland. And I applaud Cleveland the same way I applauded when a lot of people were really low on Rudy Gobert going to the Timberwolves. I applaud Cleveland. You can find these sort of squabbles with, is it a perfect fit? Was Rudy Gobert a perfect fit with Karl Anthony Towns? Is he going to eat up the space for Anthony Edwards to drive? Is Donovan Mitchell a perfect fit with a small backcourt with Darius Garland and the 2 bigs with Allen and Mo? Mm-hmm. They're not perfect, but these teams that go out that otherwise would just sort of be tanking teams or middling treadmill teams, and they go out and make themselves viable core playoff teams, I think that's good. I think the Cavs did the right thing in pairing Garland and Mitchell. And now if you do end up having to make a decision, it's obviously Mitchell if he wants to stay. I understand Darius Garland wants and is good enough to want his own team. And I think the past has shown us that you probably can't win a title with 2 super small guys. That's probably why the Knicks kind of had second thoughts about pairing Brunson and Mitchell.
Do you look at, I mean, Donovan Mitchell did not play the last 2 games of this series. He's been dealing with an injury for a lot of the season.
Yeah.
Do it's the playoffs, and 9 times out of 10, unless it's an injury, unless it's 2 things, unless it's just like such a severe injury, you can't possibly play through it, and you're going to require, or you already had surgery and you're kind of rehabbing, you're just not ready yet. 9 times out of 10, I mean, we saw this in the 76ers series, you can rehab and rest and do whatever you need to do if your team gets, pushed out of the playoffs. Is there kind of a red flag for you that Donovan Mitchell did not play these last 2 games, that maybe it's because he does want to be healthy for his new team? Because you have to think that if you're going to go ahead and be a Cleveland Cavalier next season, why not give everything your body can give to this current playoff series and try to make something happen? Why not play the last 2 games?
Ashley, I love that you're going here. I love that you're going here, because I am such a skeptic when it comes to some of these injuries. I mean, guys, I've got to throw the term soft out. So they're either soft or they're brand conscious. There were guys in the old days that were playing on like broken feet. Whatever that game was that Isaiah Thomas, had 25 in the 4th quarter. You couldn't even walk. So and I'll tell you this, the PR of these teams does not do these guys any favor when they label things as soreness. It sounds like when I get done playing tennis down in my gated community and I'm like, oh, my Achilles is sore. Like, that ain't cutting it. It's the playoffs. You got to play. They did it with Mike Conley in Minnesota. Oh, he's out with soreness. And Donovan Mitchell has soreness. Like, it doesn't sound great. And to your point, I would be out if I'm thinking, if I'm in the NBA and I'm in the playoffs and I got a chance to go to the conference finals, I better be in a wheelchair. So I see those same red flags. Now, whether that's because he thinks he doesn't owe anything to Cleveland because he's out of there, or he's just sort of protecting his career wherever he ends up playing, I don't know the answer to that. It's a very interesting conversation of how guys are more sort of health and brand conscious. I think sometimes to their own detriment, certainly from a PR perspective. I don't think there's any question Donovan Mitchell could have played last night if he absolutely wanted to. If there was no choice, it was like a Friday Night Lights episode, and they got the needle out, and they're saying, "Yo, it's state. Yeah. We got to put the needle in." Like, I think he could have played, but he's sore. So that's very interesting.
Speaking of the needle, there were reports. Donovan Mitchell called cap on these reports, but there were reports that Cavs teammates and also the Cavs organization were actually upset with Jared Allen for not taking ejections that could ultimately help him play in this series. And obviously they drastically missed him, especially when it came down to the rim protection in the paint and also just overall defense. So it seems like the Cleveland Cavaliers will put themselves and their bodies before the team. And listen, if you play for Cleveland, maybe that's just kind of, the way things are done. But we're going to take a quick break. Okay. And when we come back, we're going to talk Mavs at OKC, and we're also going to preview the game that's coming up tonight. But the Dallas Mavericks are showing that those two guys can do more than just score points. We'll be right back.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. Pitch perfect.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Ashley here, Brad here. And last night, the Dallas Mavericks took a 3-2 series lead with a 104-92 win in Oklahoma City. So that's a big deal. And we know when a series is tied 2-2, the team that wins game 5 to go up 3-2 normally wins the series 82% of the time. So numbers are on the side of the Dallas Mavericks. But the thing that I feel like was most impressive about this win was not, the triple-double, the third 30-point triple-double in the playoff career of Luka and, SGA just being phenomenal. I think what the biggest thing for me is a takeaway of Luka not only scoring points, but being a facilitator out on the floor. They were running the offense through so many different guys. One time it was Kyrie, once it was PJ Washington, and constantly circulating. And also Kyrie, not many points on the board, but he's playing defense. I mean, has this Mavs team kind of figured out that if they want to go ahead and beat Oklahoma City, it's not about them outscoring them. It's about more so confusing them.
I think it's a great point. I think you're really smart for bringing that up. We have seen in the past that these offenses that operate around the Trae Young offense, the old James Harden offense, it is very, very difficult when 5 sets of eyes are constantly keyed on that one guy. So I think Dallas putting the ball in other guys' hands, certainly having Kyrie Irving makes that an easier decision to make. But I have too noticed that same thing, that it is not the Groundhog Day type offense that we typically see from Luka Doncic. Same thing over and over, high pick and roll, get into the paint, look for a kick out. There's a lot more variety to it. There's a lot more unpredictability. And you got to give Jason Kidd credit. Jason Kidd's taken a lot of flack. He just got extended. That's a good move because the Thunder have all kinds of defenders that can give Luka trouble in terms of attrition. I mean, Lou Dort, good luck if you're going to try to go against Lou Dort and Jalen Williams and even a Cason Wallace who can do this to you for 48 minutes and you're expected to create all the offense, you're going to wear down. So I think spreading that burden out has been a huge deal. And you're right about Kyrie Irving. It would be easy to talk about, is he waiting too long to score? I mean, it's very atypical for Kyrie Irving to score 9 points, right? He's done that twice, I think, in a playoff game. But you're right. He is being patient. He is not taking over the offense, but in the seams and the cracks when Luka needs him to. He's picking his spots perfectly, and he is defending. For most of this series, he's taken on Jalen Williams, who is the second best player in OKC, one of the best isolation players in the league throughout the season. And Kyrie, at a severe size detriment, is holding his own. This guy's playing winning ball. We talk about Kyrie for all the negative stuff. We need to be giving him more love for what he's doing on this team, what he's done for Luka offensively, and the effort that he's giving defensively. That's why the Mavericks are in position to be in the conference finals.
I say all the time, the league is very lucky that Kyrie Irving is not 6'6", because he would be a serious problem.
He's nasty. I mean, you can see why other players, when they watch these guys play, that they love, the prime Derrick Rose. There's very few players that athletes of that caliber are in awe of, and Kyrie Irving is one of them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, Game 6 back in Dallas. Dallas has a great home crowd. I was actually in the building when Kyrie hit that, left hook shot to go ahead. It was insane. It was insane. It was one of the greatest.
It was so nasty.
One of the greatest games I've ever seen in my life. The crowd was crazy. Dallas has a crazy, crazy fan base. I was not familiar with their game. So shout out to the Dallas Mavericks fans. You guys definitely know how to go ahead and show up for your squad. But OKC is small, and the Mavs, take advantage of that after acquiring Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington. They out-rebounded them in the last game, Game 6 in Dallas. It just seems that whatever OKC was doing correctly, they're unable to continue doing that to make this a series. And you could go ahead and say, Josh Giddey was benched, that he's been a factor for this team kind of struggling a little bit. SGA has been phenomenal, but it just seems that the rest of the team is unable to go ahead and figure out a solution for everybody else on the floor. So is it over on Saturday? Are we done?
No, it's not over. This is I don't know if Dallas is going to win, but I don't think this is a situation where Dallas has just completely figured this out and OKC's finished any more than I thought that when Minnesota was up 2-0 on Denver. OKC's a really good team. I think what we just talked about with Luka and Kyrie, we're missing that with OKC. Yeah, SGA's been fantastic, but who's the other guy to ease that burden? Jalen Williams was that guy, creatively speaking, throughout the course of the year. And because of the job that Kyrie Irving and company is doing on him, that is putting too much on SGA. And to me, that's been the difference in this series, is Luka hasn't had to do it alone. SGA, for the most part, has. So if they get Jalen Williams, who's more than capable of coming out and having a big Game 6, then I definitely think OKC can still win this game and push it to 7, and anything can happen. OKC is a very good team. I think this is more about that Dallas has made some nice adjustments. They have a little bit more breadth to what they can do offensively right now. And so I give them the edge. To your point earlier, I think, what is it, like 85% of teams or something up 3-2? So I give them the edge. But no, this thing is not over. No, I don't think by a long shot. OKC's a really, really good team. Dallas is playing well.
We're definitely going to see, but we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to preview another team, another series where a team is trying to keep their series alive. And the team that a lot of people thought may have been mailing it in and may have been over decided to show you guys exactly why they're the reigning champs. We'll be right back.
At CBS Sports Golazo Network, we're bringing you the game.
Madness of Messi arrives!
Breaking down the game.
This is unlike anything else in the world.
And changing the game.
Get it all for nil.
That means free.
Whoa.
And all day long!
24/7.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Ashley here, Brad here. And before we went to break, I previewed this series. And this has been a very tumultuous series, if you will. The Nuggets went down 0-2 at home, the reigning champs, fresh off of a gentleman's sweep with the LA Lakers, where they were trailing that entire series at halftime and turned that around. And it looked like for a while there that like the Nuggets are just tiers above everyone else. And here come the Minnesota Timberwolves, not once, but twice in Denver, going ahead and handling business in the Mile High City. And you started to wonder, well, maybe the Nuggets have finally met their match. Well, Jokic won MVP. Some people said that he didn't deserve it. And he decided to let you know exactly why he is the MVP and flip the switch. But he didn't just flip it. The entire team flipped it. The bench flipped it. And now they are one game away of returning back to the Western Conference Finals. I mean, this has been an insane turnaround. I don't think we have seen a turnaround like this in a very long time. I mean, what are you taking away from the series?
Okay, a lot of thoughts on this.
Okay.
Here's my main one, though, is that I don't think the Nuggets really flipped a switch against the Lakers. I think the Lakers are good. I think the Lakers are a conference final caliber team. They happen to run into the Nuggets in the first round. I think there are many matchups the Lakers could win the first two series, and they played phenomenal. Anthony Davis was phenomenal. So I don't think that was the situation where, like, they played with their food and then they decided to turn it on. nor do I think they were playing with their food in the first 2 games of the series. Minnesota's awesome. And Minnesota has a specific matchup marker with being able to play those 2 bigs that they don't have to waste Rudy Gobert on Jokic. That's not a luxury that most teams have. So he can hang off on Aaron Gordon. Now he is able to roam as a rim protector. That's a big matchup deal when you have the kind of perimeter pressure Minnesota has. So they matched up well. They won the first 2 games. I just think Denver responded by, 1, playing faster before those perimeter dog defenders can settle in. And 2, Jokic said, I'm the best player in the world, which I think everybody was counting out when they were down 0-2. They're like, oh, geez, should he have won MVP? Was last year a one-year wonder for the Nuggets? No, he's the best player in the world, and it's not close. And he has made that apparent in the last 3 games. I don't think that it was something that where they were playing bad before and now they flipped a switch. I think Minnesota's really good, beat them in the first 2 games. I think the Lakers are really good, beat them on a minutes per minute basis really handily in that series. I just think at the end of games, and we've talked about this when we've been on HQ together, at the end of games, the Nuggets have so much reliability, and that's where these series and tight games with 2 good teams are won, is like 3 or 4 stretches, 5 or 6 possessions. And in those possessions, the muscle memory of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon and Michael Malone and Michael Porter Jr., all these guys that have been cohesive and stayed together through this microwave era of super teams, they know each other inside and out. And in those crucial swings possessions, they win them. And that's been the difference. So I also don't think this series is over. So we'll
that's what talk about that. I mean, Rudy Gobert is obviously having a lot of problems one-on-one with his matchup against Jokic. Jokic is showing that he may be the DPOY in the regular season, but in the playoffs, I rule him. Anthony Edwards held for 5 of 15 from shooting in Game 5, but he's been holding down the fort the entirety of this series. Mike Conley was out Game 5 with a sore Achilles. His status right now is unsure. He is questionable, so there is a possibility he returns, which would go ahead and help Anthony Edwards, in supporting cast. But Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert have not been holding down their weight, which is a direct contrast to, I feel like, what we see from the Denver Nuggets. You have Jamal Murray, who's had some really good games. You have Aaron Gordon, who's playing phenomenal. Terrific. The bench also has been showing up for the Denver Nuggets. So it just seems that like there's so much more continuity on that side of the ball than there is on the Timberwolves. So how do you see Game 6 turning out?
Well, I think you're right about all of that. I also think this shouldn't be a surprise. Go back and look at the Timberwolves in the regular season. They were not a good offensive team. They struggle in the half court. They don't have really any sort of, especially with Conley out, they don't have any creation outside of Anthony Edwards. So they're relying on Nickeil Alexander Walker and Jaden McDaniels to make 3-pointers at a high enough rate to keep up with one of the best offensive teams we've ever seen when they're clicking in the Nuggets. So this isn't surprising to me that we're starting to see the flaws of the Nuggets team that probably wasn't as good as that 2-0, the jumping out 2-0 would suggest. I still think that let's speak to Gobert and the problems he had in Game 5 guarding Jokic, which if you go back and look at those possessions, God himself could not stop some of those shots. That is not on Rudy Gobert being incapable. Draymond Green was critical of him at halftime. Let me tell you something. Prime Draymond Green would have been getting cooked too. He would have been getting cooked.
I didn't hear you say that because he has a different opinion.
I don't care what, he would have been getting cooked. He's too small when Jokic is playing that good and making those kinds of shots. And also, Rudy Gobert was not the DPOY because of his individual defense on any one given player. He's the backstop. And that's why it's so important for him to not have to guard Jokic in this series. So there's a lot of factors at play with that narrative. I just think, bottom line, any given game when you have Anthony Edwards, it's not going to be as consistent as we've seen when Edwards has struggled. They don't have the backup plan. But any given game, Anthony Edwards can get 40, and that defense can be literally the best defense you've ever seen for a given night. So, yeah, if those two things show up, they can win Game 6. And if it happens, I'm not going to say Jokic shouldn't be the MVP or the Nuggets they're playing with their food. Yeah, that can happen. The Timberwolves are very good. They just don't have as much margin for error.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting. So before we close out this episode of Beyond the Arc, let's go ahead and give some predictions. I think for me personally, I think the Timberwolves are going to go ahead and give it everything they have. But I think that game 6, the series, this ends tonight. I have the Nuggets winning this one.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I just talked a lot of BS there, but I mean, I think the Nuggets are going to close this out.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and see if our predictions weigh true. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of Beyond the Arc, and we could be talking about the Denver Nuggets returning to the Western Conference Finals, or we could be talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves saying, not so fast. We're taking this to a game 7, which I always like game 7s unless it's my team's involved. And, that's something that I enjoy. So for myself, for Brad, this has been Beyond the Arc, and we will see you guys next time.